All right.
All right. So becoming a fearless performer, actually, Musical U had a video about it, which is no longer online. They only leave it up for a couple days. And Gerald Klickstein, Klickstein, he wrote a book, The Musical Way, A Guide to Practice, Performance, and Wellness. And the way he talked about it was really nice. Basically, when we perform, hey, there's Greg.
There's Greg.
Give
Yeah.
Greg just a second. So basically, nobody teaches us how to be a fearless performer. There's a lot of people who take piano lessons, and they love the piano lessons, but they don't like the performances. And a lot of piano teachers or trumpet teachers, they don't teach you to perform. They just teach you how to play the instrument and play the instrument well. This guy, Gerald Klickstein, was talking about how to perform. Now, I need one of you to talk to see if when somebody comes back on, sometimes I can't hear you.
Testing, testing, testing.
Nope, I can't hear you. I don't know why it does that, but I'm going to unplug. I'm going to plug back in 10 seconds. So this Gerald Klickstein, and you can still hear me and see me, but I can't do either. And then I have to turn my monitor back off and on.
There.
And so he's telling us how to perform and get to a point where we're not nervous about it. We become very good performers. I'm turning my monitor on now. And so he says that you have to practice to perform. So basically, you have to practice those performance skills. Now, can I hear you if you talk?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Okay, very good. He says there's two types of knowledge. There's a procedural knowledge where you know how to do things like ride a bike for fun. But if you want to race a bike, you need to know more knowledge about it. He calls it a declarative study. So you really have to know more to race a bike than just ride a bike. And he says with performing, what you want to do is do things initially. You want to do things that are very easy to perform. So you get used to performing and you don't get that flight or fright situation. So if you practice something that is very easy to play and you practice it over and over again, then it's going to be a lot easier to avoid performance anxiety. And the other thing he says is that what you want to do is when you perform, don't perform in front of a giant audience or in front of TV. Maybe the first time you perform the piece, perform it in front of a couple of friends. You can also get a performance group like the group we have for trumpet. And that's Mars, Jupiter. Jupiter behind us? Greg?
I don't know if it could be Uranus.
Oh, but watch your language.
Neptune, I don't know. Oh.
It looks like Jupiter upside down because it has the big storm right behind your head, I believe. And it always has.
Oh, yeah, it is Jupiter, according to Zoom.
And the storm is the size of Alaska. It's a very big storm.
Oh.
Actually, yeah, I think it's the size of Alaska, and it's always there, but it does change. Anyway, so he says to perform something that you can perform easily, practice with a small group. And so like maybe we could have a group with Ed where we performed a piece on our own, a solo of some sort. We're actually kind of performing in a small group there. And it looks like, Kathy, you get some anxiety when you say solo, just with the body language. But if you do it amongst friends where there's no pressure, where there's not a big problem with it where people can really hate you on TV, or it's a big audience and you mess up and it makes the band look bad. So if you practice in small groups, and he says with those performances that you should set a definite time to do that performance. So if it's in 2 weeks on a Tuesday at 8 o'clock, always perform at that deadline, because then whether you feel like it or not, you're going to do the performance. Now, going back to being happy when you play music, if you're not happy when you're going to do the performance, maybe I'm throwing this in, you should probably listen to some music that inspires you for 5 minutes ahead of time, or do something that you really like. Watch a little TV or a video on YouTube before you do the performance to get yourself in a good mood. So he says that 3 roots of anxiety in a performance. And there's a book by Glenn Wilson called The Psychology of Performing Arts. So really, our instructors don't tell us how to perform. I think Richard does a little bit. He says if you make a mistake, just go through and don't worry about it. He hasn't said it, but maybe when you make a mistake, you shouldn't frown, because then people will know you made a mistake. Most of the audiences we play to don't know when we make mistakes unless they're really traumatic mistakes. And I had one instructor when I was in the drum and bugle corps, and we were doing the Mother Goose Parade. And if someone cracked a note, he would start swearing, and he'd use the F word in front of families, and he'd say, la, 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 you cracked a note. And if he hadn't have done that, nobody would have known.
Oh,
The kids don't care if you crack a note. They don't know what a cracked note is. The parents don't normally know unless they're very musical. And so in fact, and he would yell at us like we have no class, but he was the one swearing in front of kids. And I always made me mad that he did that, because he pointed out our flaws. So that's something that's interesting where you don't want to point out your flaws. So he says do task-related things, like practice an easier task at first. And so he gave us 10 different steps. So if you're going to play for a friend, or if you're going to play for a small group, there's less anxiety. And he says if you're going to play and record it, there's a little less anxiety too, because you can do a recording over and over again until you get it right. So if you mess up, it's not a big deal. So he recommends that when you're practicing to perform, that you record your performance. And if you get it wrong, record it again. And then it takes a little bit of the pressure off of you. He says when you are practicing for a performance, you should, when you set that date with your smaller group, go in and do everything like a real performance. So if you get halfway through the song and mess up, don't start the song again. Play the song all the way through, even though you made a mistake. Ignore the mistake and go on, and get used to doing that. And that way, if you make a mistake in a big performance that really counts, you're going to be more likely to continue and not have a problem. He says, if you're doing this performance for a small group, which we could set it up with Ed if each of us wants to play a solo and do a little critique afterwards. Yes, that bothers Kathy, I can see. But doing little steps like that can help to get you over that anxiety. And he says, so when you're doing this little performance, even in front of just a couple people or one person, come in, walk in, introduce yourself, introduce the song, tell a little bit about it. So do it just like a real performance. Play the song, play it all the way through. And when you're done, have a positive critique about it, where you say about things what you did that bothered you, things that you did well, have the other person critique you, but in a very positive way. And so doing these smaller performances will help us get over that anxiety. And this is how Kathy shows it. I show it by my leg shaking, and if actually talking about it, my leg is shaking now, and it likes to shake when it thinks about anxiety. One other thing that I used to tell my students is if they felt nervous or afraid, it's actually the same feeling as excitement. If you think of nervousness and fear and you switch it over in your head and say, oh, I'm excited, instead of I'm afraid, it actually is exactly the same feeling in the stomach, in the head. And so if you can get used to saying, I'm excited instead of I'm afraid of performing or I'm anxious about performing, it actually does help. It's hard sometimes to switch that over. So if you understand these different situations, you will be more comfortable and have it'll give you a growth mindset through the effort. So he says the fixed mindset, you succeed because of your talent. He says you don't succeed because of your talent. So if you think that you're going to fail because you're not talented, that's not the way to think, because people succeed because they practice and practice correctly, and they practice performing. So he says it's not a matter of your talent, because you're thinking that your performance is a matter of your talent, then it's going to help you fail, because you'll say, I just don't have the talent to do this. And I have people, when I'm teaching drawing, say, I just don't have skills in drawing. I can't draw a straight line. I always tell them to use a ruler. Use a ruler if you want to draw a straight line. But even art is not as much talent as practice and learning. And if you practice art enough, you actually are practicing being creative, and you can practice being creative and learn to be more and more creative. So with music, it's the same way. You could say, I don't have the talent. I have a talent for this, but practicing it develops the talent. So, let's see. So Carl Wick from Stanford says it's personal effort, not through talent. Some people have talent, but it's really personal effort, they say. And they say if a task is too hard, then it's not appropriate for one of your chores to learn to perform. So choose an appropriate repertoire. And I was having a hard time spelling repertoire, so I just said choose an appropriate rep. He says if you've performed it before and you failed, pick a different song, because you want to be able to do a song that's simple. And it could be as simple as playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to help you get over anxiety. And he says you don't have to memorize it. Some people try to memorize it, and a lot of performance, especially with piano, you have to memorize it for your performance. And he says that when you're trying to get over anxiety, always use the score, always have the music. It's interesting with Richard, sometimes you're playing the music, he says, you've got this memorized, and you're looking at the music, it's actually slowing you down. So that I've always found that was interesting. And when he said that, yeah, I did have most of it memorized. So, and he says, we need to make mistakes on stage. So if you make a mistake on stage, it's perfectly okay. And if you're doing it with the smaller group, they're not going to chastise you over it. And you can critique it at the end. Oh, I made a mistake. That was a wrong note. I'll have to work on that. And certainly, And he says, be in command of numerous settings. So when you're practicing this, if you're going to play on a big stage, go to that venue and play with nobody there, but at the exact same venue. And we do that with the concert band. We sometimes practice in the hall where we're going to play. We haven't done it as much, but if we're going to play at the organ pavilion, we should probably go and practice at the organ pavilion once before to get used to the surroundings and the sounds. With the CMA stage, we played on that before, so we know how that sounds and how that feels. So if you're, once you've started doing this with a smaller group, that you can get a performance group together and take turns performing for each other. He says then start by maybe go perform at a coffee shop or go perform at a classroom for elementary school kids, because they're not going to be critical of you. They're just going to love you no matter how you play, because just playing a trumpet in front of them, even if you play the wrong notes, is interesting. So he says do that to start getting over your anxiety. If you're recording it, it is good to get familiar with the setting and the studio first before we record it. So go into the studio, see where the controls are, see how the microphone is, do that sort of thing. And he says knowledge and skills are not talent, and we're working on knowledge and skills. When you have anxiety, it is important to celebrate it with proper cause. Attribute it, not celebrate it. When you have an anxiety, it's important to attribute it to the proper cause. So what is the anxiety? Now, Lon, do you have anxiety when you play?
Sometimes, yeah.
And do you know what the cause is?
Just nerves, just wanting to perform well.
Yeah, and I get nerves and my leg shakes, and I seem to be able to work through it, but I can't keep my leg from shaking. It's just funny. So I'm thinking maybe doing this could help with that. It's not very noticeable, but it's a definite little tremor in my right leg. My right leg does not like to perform. My left one doesn't care. So it's interesting.
When I play, if I make a mistake, I want to go back and correct it. And you can't do that when you're performing. So there's a natural thing there. And what I find is when I played my solo, beautiful Colorado, Jim had me stand up in front. So my bell was pointing right at the wall, and it was bouncing right back into my bell, and it was knocking off my timing. And that drove me crazy.
Oh, giving you a little bit of
yeah,
echo.
the bigger the horn, the more reverberation you get. And when I played in the concert, I wasn't standing next to a wall. So it was, I could get a better sound. But,
Well, maybe
I was pretty nervous when I went in there, but I was nervous because I hadn't done well in rehearsals. But,
maybe bouncing off the wall was a challenge, and when you're not bouncing off the wall, you can perform better.
Yeah, I didn't have that because literally the sound would come out of the horn and then it would echo back in. So it was knocking off my timing.
And so when we used to perform with Kingsman, we'd be on the football field, and in a few cases we'd do a company front, which was a big line, and we'd be from the one to the one. And when you're doing from the one to the one, if you're not watching the drum major, you get phasing. It la 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 very easily.
Yeah.
It echoes, and so you just have to watch the drum major, because you got to do your timing to him and not listen to the other people, which is wrong, because normally when we're in a clumped up group, you really listen to the other people. And our problem was our drum major was horrible. He would do his arms like this, but his legs would be moving at a different speed. And sometimes we just said, don't look at him. And he fell off the podium during the middle of a show, and it was a high podium. And hard to not laugh when you're performing. So those are some things that certainly knowing your environment helps. And so knowing the cause. And Kathy, what's the cause of your anxiety? Nervousness?
Nervousness and Lon, do you remember that time that we were over at one of our first concerts and I was supposed to play that solo in
Yeah.
between? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember what I did?
How goosed up you were before it. Yeah, you were always talking about it.
I just couldn't do it. I had to
Yeah.
stop in the middle and start over. I mean, I was just, and I thought, I'm not even going back to the concert. It was halftime. I thought, you gotta go or you'll never pick your horn up again. But that was the most embarrassing. People were great about it, but I could have sunk through the floor. And I just couldn't hit the high notes. I just was just too nervous to do it. I picked a song that was too hard.
Well,
I should have picked a better.
do you remember John Kennedy's funeral?
Yeah.
The military funeral. They had an Army guy play taps. And he was a professional musician, a lieutenant colonel, and he flubbed in the middle. He had a blurb in the middle of it. And my dad knew the guy. My dad knew him during World War II. They were in a band together, and he said, "Yeah," he said he was a fine trumpet player. He said, and all those years later, after the war, he shouldn't have made a mistake. So that's probably just nerves. But I mean,
Well,
even a guy like that makes a mistake, then you say, well, he's a professional. He's really good at it. He's done this a lot. If he makes a mistake and goes on, I guess I can too.
Yeah.
how many times has he played taps? But that could also be when you're playing taps for John Kennedy's death, you might choke up in the middle. I don't know that I could get through because of that fact. Like I played taps for a funeral of my friend,
Yeah.
and I got through it and I played it well, but I was really choked up in the middle. And that's very
It
difficult.
was knowing he was on live TV, probably more than anything, because that was 1963. We didn't have that much live TV in those days.
And so he talks about when you're practicing to be deliberate about it and make sure you're practicing. And when you're practicing for the performance, you can't stop and go back, play the note again.
That's
you have
right.
to play it all the way through.
That's
if
right.
you mess up, that's fine. Go back and play the whole song all the way through. Now, you don't want to play it like a robot. So if you just memorize it and play it, and you get it down where you memorize it, you want to play it with some feeling. So you want to be able to get through it and have a little more feeling than just being robotic on it. So
I taught briefing in the Navy. I was a professional briefer because I worked in intelligence, and that's what you do. You brief people, and you brief some very important people and very high-ranking people, and you can't choke up. You have to keep your wits about you. But when people do that, I found it easy to talk. I find it much harder to play. But I taught briefing, and it's pretty interesting to see all the different reactions that people have and how they tense up. But one thing that happens is they start doing things subconsciously. They start moving. They start rattling their keys. They start fidgeting about. Another thing is that their breath tenses up, and they can't breathe, and they start making mistakes. And I think that in playing too, that one of the things that when you're playing a performance, don't let your shoulders get tight. Don't let your lungs get tight. Keep your breath control. And if you concentrate on your breathing beforehand, and then during the concert, keep thinking about your breath, it won't be so bad. But people get nervous and they do this, and their shoulders go up and their breathing gets tight, and then heaven forbid, I've got that in my section.
Yeah. We're done with our lesson time. But this guy, Gerald Klickstein, has a website, and I believe, I can't find it here, but it's themusiciansway.com. I will themusiciansway.com, all one word. And he has hints and different exercises there that are free. And so I will make sure that that link is correct and email it to you, but not right now because I got to get back to painting. I have the painter's lunch in my car. So.
Okay, I have one quick question. There's a song I've been trying to look up to print for our class. It's something like De Harangas. It's a Spanish song. We've played it in band before. Lon, do you remember De Harangas? Beautiful. And if I could find it, I'd make the parts for our Wednesday group.
De Harangas.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay, I'll try and look.
So everybody, Kathy and Greg, if you would email me with your phone number, so if I'm running a little late, I can tell
Okay.
you. That'll be good, and I'd be able to contact you for other things too, if you want to. And then I only call you at 4 at night, once or twice.
Oh, that's okay.
That's a joke. All right, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much. I had another one worked up, is singing in tune and finding a note, and there were some nice little tips for that, but I'll do that next time.
Okay.
And you can use it for playing in tune. They were really very insightful, I thought.
Super.
All right, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank